What's the most outrageously expensive thing you've seen in person? The Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chime in steel at an only watch showing in London. All the big watch companies do a one-off for the charity auction, and Patek usually only do watches in precious metals. A grand complication in steel is truly a one-off. It sold for 31 million Swiss francs, close to 35 M USD. I actually held it in my gloved hand. Whilst obviously nothing like that price, the most casually rich thing I came across amongst my friends, who are all varying degrees of working class to wealthy but nothing overtly ridiculous, also involved a Patek. I was traveling to the wedding of two friends. I live in the capital city but they were getting married in the countryside. The bride calls me to ask if I can pick up her wedding day watch for the groom as she'd forgotten to collect it. It still needed to be paid for and she was trying to work out ways to transfer me cash instantly to pick it up, but the bank wouldn't do an instant transfer for the amount. Thinking she was overcomplicating things, I said, why don't I just pay for it on my credit card, then you can pay me back whenever. I joked, as long as it doesn't cost more than 20 grand as that's my credit limit, haha. And she said, okay, don't worry about it. Mum can detour past and she'll pick it up. At the reception I clocked a brand new Patek on the groom's wrist. He's not even into watches. When I was starting to get into watches, I found a picture of a Patek that tracked the stars in the sky and I said, wow, that's cool. If that's less than $300, I'm buying it on the spot. And so I googled it, and in a way, I was right. It's $300,000. The CEO of my husband's company years back held a Christmas party at this house. At the time, the company was a startup and there was maybe 20 employees. He had original Picasso artwork on his walls. I have no idea how much they were actually worth, but I thought that was pretty cool. I got to see one. I studied in art school in a friend of a friend's home. I was in awe. So, like, you eat your Pop-Tarts in the same room as your inherited Picasso? My art class went to the Picasso Museum at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. There was paintings, statues, pieces from his life. Probably the most expensive place I have ever been in. My high school orchestra teacher, who is also concert master for the Arkansas Symphony, was loaned a $12 million Stradivarius anonymously for an upcoming performance. I wasn't allowed to touch it, but I got a solid look at it, as well as heard it from 3 feet away. Concert master for the Arkansas Symphony, very impressive. But I wasn't aware that Stradivarius have made banjos. Yes they did, but they are super rare. It was a family business and the two brothers were the most involved. Antonio Stradivari specialized in violins and cellos whilst his sibling Joseph made cruder instruments including kazoos. After a while Antonio's orchestra-focused instruments gained widespread acclaim and the family elders, fearful of losing reputation, made a hard decision. They only kept selling Antonio's instruments and banjos. My sister used to work on super yachts. I'd go visit her every now and again and stay on the boat during off-season, in crew quarters. This was about €500 million worth of boat, and it was pretty damn fancy. It had glass flooring and staircases that turned opaque if you stood on them so people couldn't look up your skirt. All the usual fancy boats like a spa and gym and movies that hadn't even been released at the cinema yet. I remember visiting Street Tropez after I graduated and just seeing all those Superlux yachts parked up. Crazy money just to have them moored up there, let alone to buy in the first place. I visited St. Tropez once, and I was kind of amazed that the town isn't even that pretty. Movies that hadn't come out in theaters yet, I forget what they call that. It's like a pre-cinema or something. I work in high-end AV and run into them once in a while. Client never has any idea what it is or that they had the capability. I went to a party at a pool house when I was a teenager. Just the pool house was 4,000 square ft. The kid's grandfather invented sheetrock. Trust fund babies. God damn it. Why wasn't I a trust fund baby? I was a blue collar trust fund baby. 2 packs of Mavericks and a case of Natty Light were bequeathed to me on my 18th birthday. Was their last name Flintstone? My apartment is 750 square ft. Totally useless comment, but I'm just so blown away sometimes that entire annual expenditures is easily less than people pay for bottles of wine. And their pool house can fit 5 of my entire living space, not even including the pool. I don't get why you'd want a lot of that I want a bigger apartment, but geez, I'd rather have a nice house in the suburbs and smaller apartments in my favorite cities rather than one massive mansion where I'd never use 90% of the space. Outside of the crown jewels and art museums, I went to Harrods and saw a chandelier worth £50,000. I spotted a gold toilet brush for £1,000, a grand for a refined bog brush. Haha, this just reminded me of my husband. We went to Poundland once and I grabbed a toilet brush and the horrified expression my husband gave me was hilarious. He said, "What would people think?" And I was like, I'm fairly certain no one goes into someone's bathroom and sees the toilet brush and think, cheap pricks, could have at least swung for the fiver. A $2.5 million mansion in Missouri. My roommate and I played dress up and went to the showing for the free food. When we asked about the entire first story being stone, including the furniture, we were told it was because the river overflowed and flooded the mansion every year. Everything was made of stone so it could be cleaned easily. Why the F would anyone spend money on that? Or just build the house a little uphill? Prince Eric needed a place the in-laws could come visit. A freshly drafted NFL rookie stayed at a hotel I worked at and partied a little too hard. When checking out he left over $100K in jewelry in the room. I was tasked with going and getting it and securing it till someone from his posse could come get it. I wore it for a few hours for fun. Heavy AF and so effin' shiny. A bracelet that was wider than the biggest watch covered in diamonds. And a chain that went past my sternum and probably 1/2 inches in thickness, also completely encrusted in diamonds. This is why poverty is such a huge issue with those type of people after they stop playing, because they've never had money, way overspend and then end up poor again. I saw something once where this former NFL player who became a CPA, I forget who, sits down with every rookie and talks about finances and making their money last. I guess it's not entirely outrageous, but I went to a family-owned aquarium store a couple months ago to get some medicine for my guppies and they were selling 1-year-old arowana fish for $6,000 each. I'm probably just ignorant when it comes to prices of exotic fish, but I was quite surprised considering they were surrounded by guppies and goldfish whose lives are worth approximately $2.50 each. CJ will pay 15,000 bells for that thing. There's a few reasons for their price. They are endangered and difficult to breed in captivity, which contributes heavily to the price. I have always assumed part of it is to prevent people who cannot afford to care for them properly from buying them. They are best off living in a 400+ gallon aquarium, which can easily cost over $5,000 to get one fully set up. They also eat voraciously, grow large and live for up to 15 years. A lot of knowledge and money to take care of them, while guppies can be well cared for in a 10-gallon tank and pre-made flake foods. That's my 2 cents. Goldfish, however, should not be cheap, since they grow huge and less stunted in a bowl. They are most appropriate for ponds or large aquariums, where they can live for a very long time as well. Also, they can just casually flick themselves and break their backs. Twits, so you could potentially pay a few thousand for a fish that then the next week is stuck in a permanent bend. In Aspen, CO, a few years back in a small antique store, we walk in and the guy working there never even acknowledges us while he's casually chatting on his phone. I see a carved wood eagle sculpture about 2 feet tall and 1 foot wide. I flip over the price tag, $125,000. I laughed out loud, looked at my friend and said this isn't our kind of store and promptly left. Aspen is the weirdest place I've ever visited. I'll tell ya where. Someplace warm. A place where the beer flows like wine. Where beautiful women instinctively flock like the salmon of Capistrano. I'm talking about a little place called Aspen. I don't know, Lloyd. The French are a-holes. Aspen can have good finds though too. I was walking around town one day and it was a lot colder than I had expected, so I popped into the thrift store and bought a sweater for $8 to keep me warm. It looked pretty posh, so I googled when I got home and saw that it retails for $1,200 and goes used for $500-800. Always go to thrift stores in rich people places. They have the nicest stuff. A comic book shop called Silver Snail used to have Amazing Spider-Man #1 on display and for sale. This was back in the mid-90s. Not a comic book guy, but a story I read a decade ago always stuck with me. This one guy makes money by buying houses, gutting and redoing the insides, then selling it. One day he and his friend were ripping out drywall when they came across the first comic that had Superman in it, Action Comics 1. The guy who owned the building, and thus the comic found in the wall, was treating it reverently. The other guy wanted to hold it and so it was handed over to him, but he started to spaz out and kept yanking the cover open and closed, going no way, no way, that he tore the cover right off. It went from being worth a huge amount to rather much less. If true WTF was wrong with that guy, I'd be scared to breath in the vicinity of something like that worth so much. I attended a wedding that was rumored to cost well over $1 million. There was 2 venues. If I remember, there was 9+ member band flown in from Nick, another strings band during the ceremony, and a 3rd trumpet band that escorted the walk to the reception. An artist oil painted the reception live at the party. The food was incredible. Each table was over the top with guests having their own glass engraved with their name to take home. They gave people dancing shoes you could take home. It was incredible and probably the most expensive private event I will ever attend. I'm sure I'm missing some other details, but everything was over the top. Most expensive party I've been at was a corporate function. They had a restaurant crawl through Beverly Hills with a different course at each restaurant. Finished up at the Beverly Wilshire. After that the company had a private party in Rodeo Drive, shut the street down and paid the shops to stay open. The whole week was nuts. It was a convention exhibition in 2000 during the initial internet bubble. One night I went to a party in one of the famous nightclubs with celebrity lookalikes handing out drinks. Another night a company had hired a penthouse suite in some famous hotel and got a celebrity chef in to cook Wolfgang Buckeye Ike. Another company hired Universal Studios Park for 50 people all evening. Another hired QE2 for a meal or whatever liner is berthed up in that area. It was my first business trip and I was gobsmacked. I work security at an art museum and we exhibited this little Chinese teacup with a rooster on it. Little A thing was worth over $36 million. Apparently there were only 4 in the whole world. I felt unsafe around it, like I'm not risking my life for this stupid cup. Did you ever learn the artist age of the thing? Context etc as to why it was so damned expensive? $10 K20K bicycles. I must have looked poor, because the guy running the place pretty much kicked me out as soon as I walked in. A wealthy couple had a pair of Steinway Concert Grand Model D pianos at opposite ends of their spacious living room. Neither the husband nor his wife played. The pianos, valued at about $175,000 each, were just there for show, and when they hired someone like me to play piano for an occasional cocktail dinner party. Note: I once posted this comment some time ago to a similar question in Ask Reddit. Did they just hire one person for parties? Seems like a lost opportunity for dueling pianos, like some high-end dueling banjos. At least they're amazing instruments. I, myself, have been able to hear and play a Model D at when I was in college, as they had one out for anyone to play at. They also had the system that could turn it into a player piano and had that running for most of each day. Those Steinways kinda ruined other pianos for me. Sound wise, I work as a sound tech in a concert hall and we have both an American Steinway D and a Yamaha C7. The Yamaha kicks the shout of the Steinway in every way. It sounds better and more balanced, less muddy. It has no weird buzzy strings that piano techs claim don't exist but all my colleagues hear and are bothered by. It has a better dynamic range. It sounds a million times better with mics on it, but almost every pianist picks the Steinway. I'm pretty sure if you blindfolded them it would go the other way, but most people just aren't great at actually listening and trust in the cash of the brand name instead. This all despite that the Steinway gets way more maintenance attention and has the action totally rebuilt every couple years. And the Yamaha hasn't really had major work in 20 years. Not to say that the D is a bad piano, just responding to the ruined other pianos part. Give others a shot and close your eyes and pretend it says Steinway on the side and see how you feel. Catered a high school graduation party. We did fried chicken and mashed potatoes, so had no idea how we ended up serving food in a mansion. Turns out the daughter was going to Auburn, so they wanted something southern. Out of 200 people there, they ate maybe 4 full plates of food. They had another catering bring the real party food. TLDR. People drop $3K on food just for the novelty of it. Do rich people not like fried chicken? I'm pretty sure I'd still like that no matter how much money I had. You can't eat fried chicken politely. When you're a 120 pounds in the rain, you might not lol. Only the people very clearly hadn't come from money ate. I live in Nick and like to be a tourist sometimes. So my husband and I went to the 5th Avenue Tiffany's. I don't even wear jewelry, but I like shiny things and are very nice. Clearly bored sales associate let me try on a yellow diamond, 2.5 carat engagement ring. For fun. I asked the price and it was $65,000. I can't even imagine how rich you would have to be to have that as your engagement ring and that be a normal thing. My wife and I were walking around the Vegas Strip and went into Caesar's Palace, just exploring. We were carrying those super tall colorful daiquiris from Fat Tuesday. Basically we both looked like Cousin Eddie from Vegas Vacation. We wandered into an art gallery where they had a collection of sculptures of Cirque du Soleil performers by Richard McDonald. We were the only ones in there so the board curator showed us around. So we're walking around, very sh-faced, sipping on daiquiris and saying very interesting. And we just bought a house for that much. You know what they say, if you have to ask the price you can't afford it. I ask the price on chocolate bars. I shook Bill Gates' hand in 8th grade. He visited our school to make a donation to our district. Haven't came across anything more expensive since then. I play Magic the Gathering. My decks aren't expensive, but they are not cheap either. Normally around $400 to $700. Then I played against a guy who had a deck worth around $29,000. Crazy thing is that this was his first deck, and he bought all of the cards recently. He didn't even play that often either. So imagine dropping almost 30 grand on something that you use maybe once or twice a month. F-35 and F-22, both at air shows. F-35s were parked and didn't fly but I got to see the F-22 showing off at a different air show. The way I describe it is it's an IRL cheat code plane. It doesn't even look real. One time back in the Obama days I was at Pearl Harbor, touring the Missouri. While walking down the deck, a nuclear submarine just rolls on by NBD while Air Force One and a flight of F-35s came in. It was surreal. And while Air Force One is loud AF, the F-35s are eerily quiet. Went to Disney World a few years back and got a glass slipper from Oribus Brothers. One of the items they had was a jewel replica of the castle. It costs more than $30,000, and don't get me wrong, the thing looked wicked but I'm not spending more on a decorative piece that will live behind glass, for my own sanity, than I spent on my car. It still shocks me whenever I fly and I look through magazines and see ridiculously expensive a gold pen for $1,700 plus that you can't sign your death bills with. Those magazines are crazy, but that price for a really good pen isn't that crazy. The set designs for fashion shows. When I was working as a scenic carpenter I was always amazed at the amount of money spent on scenery that will go right into the trash for events that last 30 minutes to a couple of hours. We covered an empty warehouse floor in Manhattan with something like 50,000 square feet of beveled oak boards in one instance. Material costs aside, we had a crew of around 20 guys making at minimum $25 per hour working for days around the clock to make it happen. Paul Newman's Rolex Daytona at an auction sold for $5,475,000. There's a fancy liquor store in my town that I go and visit just to look at stuff. They have a $30,000 bottle of cognac. The Mona Lisa I guess. Fun fact, the Mona Lisa is literally priceless. It can't be replaced because the artist isn't around, and because there isn't another one like it to compare it to. It can't be assigned a monetary value either, so the Mona Lisa is both priceless and uninsured. Source: been teaching insurance law since 2011. A $1 billion home. At least he's giving the 600 staff a job. When I went to the rich part of the city, this one house had native art doors, specifically West Coast Canada native art. I'm native and my aunt owns a native art studio, so I already know this is expensive since it was nearly the entire surface area. I would estimate that the doors on this house cost $60,000 $100,000. A $500 aluminum Christmas tree that a friend owned. I saw a second-hand university textbook once. The Air and Space Museum outside Washington, D.C. has some spacecraft and airplanes that I presume are worth millions. Great museum. I recommend everyone check it out when it's allowed again. University Cafe charged $2 for a vending machine sized bag of Lay's. It's asinine.